Today we have a shoulder session and I have my good friend, Steven Davis, owner of, is it still Davis Fitness Method?
It is.
A gym in Seattle as well as an online trainer. He is what I would call an anatomy nerd when it comes to training and strength training, bodybuilding, all that stuff. This dude is very, very intelligent with movement, limb lengths, leverages, all that kind of stuff. So it's gonna be cool to have him kind of coach me through some movements. I'm gonna coach him through some movements. And we're gonna have a good discussion. So you're gonna see a full shoulder session with two coaches coaching each other and talking about coaching stuff. Let's get into it. Just started taking CJC1295 and ipamorelin, like peptides and shit. But like, this is what like stars are taking for their skin, or like if you get an injury, you can do BBC157, I think it is, and like your injuries heal like that. Like it's nuts. It's gonna be like the future of stuff. I've had some guys on the podcast talk about it.
It's injectable?
Yeah, almost all of them are. They're starting to make capsules for some of them.
Gotcha.
Most of them are subcutaneous. So it's literally like, I like pinch my skin.
I did intramuscular carnitine.
Fuck. Did it do anything?
Fuck if I know, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've heard that's kind of like a myth.
apparently a lot of the studies surrounding carnitine are all oral, and it's not bioavailable orally.
Yeah.
Or at least
Across the, what is it, the blood-brain barrier or whatever?
Yeah, so like the guy that's coaching me was like, pin this.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I can't fucking pin it.
Yeah.
So Jasmine's like, used to be a medical assistant. So I was like, boom, boom, butt cheek.
Yeah.
And like, I tried to die for a while. Fucking terrible.
Yeah. Subcutaneous is easy. I just do it right here, just pinch my skin a little bit.
That sounds nice.
You do it 5 days a week, and this is week 2. Feel good, but like I don't think there's anything yet.
Yeah.
Sleep is ridiculously good, and you don't sleep more, you just get more out of your sleep basically. It kicks you into REM sleep easier. We're doing like straight bro. Today's shoulders. Cool. So it's like more shoulder volume in a single session than I'm used to even. Okay. This is like week 1 of the program. I'm just like going all in on the bodybuilding phase. I'm like, all right, you do the program, you do everything.
Yeah.
So this is real bodybuilding. Warm-up sets is needed. 3 sets of working sets, 1 set of failure. No rep count.
Just
what do I
get
do?
to failure.
We're just gonna go hard at
Yeah.
it. Do you do anything specific for like warm up?
Sometimes like lat stretch, cable ER. It really depends on if I'm feeling tight that day or not.
If I deadlift, that's the only time I ever, like deadlifts from the floor is the only time I ever actually warm up. This would be a good question for you actually. I don't remember where I read it. Like when you're doing overhead press, I think like number 1, like get comfortable with your width probably.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But talking about going wider for more like lateral head and rear delt versus the closer you coming in, more interior.
I can see that only just because if you're just looking at like that overall moment of the shoulder, because it's like this is gonna leverage you more out of the bottom to get overhead versus when you're here. The more externally rotated you are, the more it's supposed to pull onto the lateral delt.
Got it. So the wider you go, the more external rotation you have.
Depending on how good you are getting tight under the bar.
It might even be better than to do dumbbells or even a machine for some people. I feel like we should stay in like the heavy 6.
Okay.
And then we'll do like a back off set.
Okay.
I'm more likely to get shoulder pain bench pressing than overhead pressing though.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. Anterior pain, for sure. How tall are you?
6'1".
That's another thing is like your wingspan's probably easily a few inches longer than mine. You have more distance to travel. And if you're coming in closer, it's even more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I might bias a wide because it's a shorter range of motion, which I don't know if that's necessarily a positive thing. When I'm bench pressing, I will easily get like that cambered bar or a neutral bar feels so much better for me. And I think it's because it forces me to get a little bit wider. I think there's a lot of untouched parts. Like right now it's so much like volume. There's obviously now we're learning a lot about the stretch phase of a movement.
Yeah.
But in certain, like in this even, like very difficult to put your delt in a fully stretched position. Most people don't do it with their traps either because they got to really learn how to depress a ton. And like I like a T-bar row because you can roll it forward and shit, but people don't think about that stuff. But I think sometimes people overcomplicate the technicality of an exercise to where their volume drops off because the hard part is like, okay, so effort, RIR, like that's the most important part is if you're reaching close to failure and they're like, well, I am failing. I'm like, yeah, but you're doing 10 pounds and you're going so slow and you're squeezing. It's like, I don't know if that's
enough mechanical tension there.
There's not. I don't know if there's any research to prove that shit.
Yeah, the big thing is like you could be doing less specifically isolated target, but with more load, and you're more likely to fatigue that tissue. We know that to get extension of this shoulder, my lat's involved.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing this, even if I give it a little swing with some more weight, that's gonna do more for me than if I was like 100% of 30 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Like you get 100% of 30 pounds versus I've got 70% of 100 pounds, what's more volume?
Yeah.
It's like 70 of 100.
100%. Should try to go a little wider than you normally do. See if that shortened range of motion helps your long ass arms.
Also a little bit more to stabilize.
People underappreciate the length of limbs and how that changes something. You know what I mean? Because you could be stronger than me and I could do more on an exercise like this, let's say. If we have the same width, it's way easier for me to stabilize because I have shorter legs. So it's actually a wider width relative to my total length.
Yep.
And then like same thing with overhead. No matter how wide you go, my range of motion is probably gonna be shorter. So many people see these like cool functional exercises and they create such a lack of stability that it makes it feel difficult because their body's constantly trying to be stable and it's taken away from the isolation of exercise. So even in this setting, like if we were doing a Smith machine, it'd be even more stable.
Even more.
If we were doing a seated Smith machine, even more stable. It's like if somebody's doing like a seated with no back support, single arm dumbbell press, you're not gonna build nearly as much muscle as if you did a back supported dual dumbbell press.
And you're probably doing less to actually improve the stability of your shoulder, and you're probably doing less to actually improve the stability of your core, because there's like something that would be better. My core is going to be challenged with anything in that overhead or front rack. I'm now also not getting the most out of my shoulder.
If you really need to work on that, do an extra exercise later. Don't try to combine the two and butcher both exercises. Do, like you said, like a single arm farmer's carry later on, you'll be fine. Like,
I think the one value add, I think, in a situation like that is actually novelty. Just like the fact that somebody enjoys it and they want something different or new, and they're like, I've already done all these other ones. And
100%.
it's like, sure, all right, have at it.
If I have a fat loss client that I'm also trying to make the training enjoyable so that they can adhere to the gym and burning calories, 100%. I will do all that kind of shit because it does make it more enjoyable for them. But if somebody wants
like
to
a
seriously,
seated Z press, like
you're like,
oh, look.
exactly. It's challenging, but like if you really want to like build muscle or strength, create like let this stuff. That's why I love Hatfield squats. Like safety bar, heels elevate, hold on to this. I don't have to worry about any stability. I can just crush my quads. Way better. Towel?
Yeah.
Oh, sick. Yeah, those are way fucking nicer.
I haven't used them yet, so. Do you ever hold a lacrosse ball while you're doing this one?
No, I'm with it though.
Try it.
Yeah, these are fucking nice, dude.
Technique I learned from a couple coaches, like you're cuffed up, right? But you're losing irradiation through your hand. So if you hold these as you're going up and you squeeze them.
Let's try it. Am I just trying to constantly crush the balls too?
Yep.
The only time I give that advice, crush the balls. Oh, the balls help a lot. I'm immature. I think balls is funny. Cue I love with these two is to lead with your elbow. If you're leading with your elbow and you're going away from your body, you'll keep it so much more in your delts. It's hard to not activate your traps at all. And I hate when people say that, like, don't let your traps activate, which is damn near impossible. If you're going close to failure, which you should be on something like this, your traps are gonna fire a little bit. If you do lead with your elbows with that soft bend and you just pull away from your body instead of going up, I'm going away, it's so much more delt.
Crush those balls.
You really did. Power building, it's kind of like that whole functional conversation. Like I actually really love power building for a lot of my clients. I have a more specific goal than the average gym pop person only because I've been training for so long. But like once upon a time, I wanted the same thing. I want to feel good. I want to be relatively jacked, and I want to be strong. You know, I didn't have like, I just want to be jacked. Now I literally could care less if I'm super strong. Like if I'm strong, that's great. But like if I can carry all the groceries in one trip, I can pick up my daughter, no problem. Like I'm cool, you know, I don't need to deadlift the truck. For me, I just want to get jacked. I think power building it's just not specific enough for hypertrophy. People can do really well with it, and some people I think are hyper responders to lower volume because that's their best way of creating as much mechanical tension as possible, is lifting super heavy with compound lifts. Whereas a lot of people, I don't think that's the case. I think the best way for them to create as much mechanical tension as possible is actually to do higher reps and squeeze the muscle, have a better mind-muscle connection, do safer exercises that allow you to go to failure, because all of it is really just creating as much tension as possible. Whether it takes you 10 reps, a machine, low reps, a barbell, you know what I mean? But I think it's good for some people, and I think it's good for gym pop because it's like, you know, power building, power lift heavy, but also do some accessory for bodybuilding. But the more advanced somebody gets, I just don't think it's specific enough.
I think my my favorite cue for these. Getting your arm in that like scapular plane where it's kind of like where your shoulder blade meets the rib cage. Right there's the most stable position for your shoulder.
Yeah.
So you're gonna get a little bit more output.
I've noticed that a ton. Like that's one thing, that's a big change. What helps me keep in that position too is like sticking my chest out. Not necessarily that like everybody needs to, but when I think chest out, it like helps me keep my shoulders down, and then I think about this versus when I'm leaning forward, I automatically just, I mean, your body's gonna compensate, try to get it, like if you're going up, it's gonna keep going up. That's why people bench press and they're like, you know, they don't even think about it, but you're just creating all this tension in your neck and stuff, and or like a row, and you're like reaching. But yeah, I love that cue. We're going front raises. How much have you like dug into volume research and stuff like that?
Most of the stuff that Israel shares, maximum recoverable, minimum effective, sets per session. Once they went over 10 or something like that.
Yeah, I think the research shows 8 to 12, but they usually recommend closer to 10.
Yeah, I imagine it's like with most things, like with creatine, like average they say like 3 to 5 grams, but now they're saying per kilo, 0.1 gram per kilo.
Yeah.
I imagine it's like that. As you become more trained, as you have in a more appreciable amount of volume. It probably also has to do with like your hormone levels too, right?
Yeah, like there's some muscle groups I'm only training once a week, and usually I don't recommend that, and I still wouldn't recommend it for most people. But as I dug through like more and more of the research, James Krieger's Volume Bible is a really good place to start. So just, dude, he goes through everything. The only thing that actually shows that they have anything that says after this point per session, 8 to 12, it's unfavorable, was muscle protein synthesis. Everything else was like to be determined, or like we don't know what the upper end is. So like when we're talking about central fatigue or like mechanical tension or anything like that, they don't know. Or like hormone levels or anything, really, it's just muscle protein synthesis kind of tapers off above like 1,000 milligram per nanoliter or whatever it is. You're probably not have to worry about that, which is why it would probably work, because your muscle protein synthesis is always gonna be high. But then you think about, well, what about people who are natural bodybuilders like Doug Miller, who does fucking 20 sets of chest in a single session? I gotta imagine there's like an adaptive process, which is why I was like, you know what, like I'm okay doing that. I'm gonna dive into this and see how it works, because it's gonna be novel. I haven't done this in years, so it might work. And I've been training for 12 to 13 years every week. I gotta imagine I can handle more volume per session than the people in the study.
You get a bit of anecdotal evidence, so you're not like just like stuck there saying like, oh, well, this is what happened here. I would even imagine on some stuff, it's like same thing we're seeing, like, oh, what if my grip is here? What if my grip is there? It's like, how do we know what's happening tension-wise?
Yeah.
It's based on execution.
Studies show averages, not individuals.
Yeah. And you're not going like, oh, well, like hell with that altogether. But it's like you're using that to be like, try to make an informed decision or another like hypothesis.
Right.
So
in some of these sessions, I'm doing like 15 sets on a single muscle, which is above that range. Yeah. But again, I'm like, I gotta imagine that there's something there that's gonna be effective, because I've trained myself to that point.
Right. Are they isolation? Or are they compound? Like, are you doing 15 compound?
Yeah.
Are you doing 15
Exactly, because those are way
isolation?
more fatiguing. And usually in studies, they do compound, because what they'll do is like bench, pull down, leg press, because they need to get a bang for their buck. They don't train all muscles in those ranges. Like, and even if you think about, then I started thinking, so one of the really popular studies on total volume was 40 sets per muscle group per week. And in that study, I'm pretty damn sure that's the one they did bench press, lat pull down, and leg press. And they just tested the quads, the chest, and the lats. But they only trained 3 or 4 days a week. So you can't accomplish 40 sets per week without doing more than 8 to 12 in one of the sessions at least. You know what I mean? So then you go, okay, does it wash out when you have that? And then on the other side, it's like, how experienced are these people? There was that one study that showed you only needed 1/8 of your volume to maintain the muscle you have. And so they had trained individuals, but if you dig into it, trained individuals, they took people and they put them through a 16-week training program and then considered them trained. So they're untrained, but then they trained them for 16 weeks and then did a study and said that now that they're trained, we'll put them through this volume study, and they only need 1/8 to maintain their gains. I'm sorry, but if you train for 4 months, you're still a newbie.
The biggest thing I think I've noticed is like probably more to do with just coming off the cut. I don't know what exactly I was feeling like before, because I was like on the heavier end. I was like 215. Little injuries that pop up. I was doing reverse band squats with broad jumps, and then like after one of my jumps, I was like, oh fuck. Went back for my squats. Squats were fine. Went for my jumps again, and now it's been fucked for like a month and a half.
Yeah, that's why I like take people through cut. I usually try to, if I can, because some people love that style training. But if we get really lean, I usually try to, I'm like, all right, let's go towards like, I have somebody who like, I actually had to switch to a lot of machines and stuff for the same reason. They're getting leaner and they're like, I love the barbell and stuff. I'm like, hey, just give me a month of cables and bands and machines because your joints are gonna thank you, especially as you're dieting.
Less joint packing. Dude, it was literally like, as soon as I turned, like literally finished the shoot, turn around, I want to do this shit. That was not the move.
I like dumbbell laterals. I actually have no idea. I just love the way they feel. But cable, especially if you're doing single arm, I mean, when we were doing crossing ones, that too, but when you're doing single arm, you can lean. And then now that we know the stretch is important, you can actually get that like negative that stretches the delt. When I go in, it's stretching it and then I can raise. Versus dumbbells, I stop here. My range of motion is limited.
Yeah. For lateral, the first 20 degrees of motion come through the supraspinatus. So technically lengthened delt is here. So you just need something that comes on at about 90 degrees around there.
Okay.
And then picks up. Here, you'll like your delt is getting stretched, but most of what's initiating that movement is your supraspinatus. So it's like, sure, you could add more load here, but you're gonna be limited by that versus taxing the delt. And the length and end range is like 20 degrees of abduction of the shoulder.
Yeah. Basically, don't shrug, right?
Try not to let these come together.
Here, let me grab lighter bells.
Yeah.
So I can actually do this right. So when I'm trying to isolate the laterals, does it help to turn it in a little bit?
I don't think that's gonna be as important as keeping this apart. Like that's the bang for your buck right there. Yep, boom, right on that guy. Still getting a little motion here. Yeah, almost like pro check and reach out.
Which makes it look like you're not doing anything.
But you can see this guy's just like popping up right here.
Versus what I was doing before, which is this, right? And I'm basically pinching up because I'm thinking, I just want more range of motion. So almost round and almost like, this is so funny because like, you always want to think like good posture, but it's almost like bad. I'm almost like internally rotating and like protracting forward, right? To keep it in like that weird position. And like, probably why they call them like rear delt swings.
If you look only at where the rear delt attaches, it's like onto the spine, like that little spine of the scap and your upper arm. If this area is getting pulled together, that's all that arm needs to do, right? So like, it only needs to do that to get this shorter. So you get the sense that, oh, it's moving higher, but it's not getting more contracted.
Right. It's literally just from my traps basically shrugging up.
Yep.
Now, do you think, going back to what we were talking about earlier, like, is this a scenario where it wouldn't apply?
The one thing about you is bring the intensity to everything. So it doesn't fucking matter. Yeah, like I do those swings, I do them to failure, my rear delt's gonna grow and my mid trap's probably gonna grow a bit.
Whether my trap fires first or last, it doesn't matter because I'm gonna fry the rear delt on the way.
Yep.
But that's the hard part too, is like the brutal honesty of some people not knowing, because I've had to, for me, filming was actually the thing that I would be like, oh, I took it all the way to failure, and then I watched, I'm like, oh fuck, that was not failure training. I think you're better off figuring out the form.
I would even say then also though, like for the people that it's actually gonna matter is like of the top of the, like, okay, like is your rear delt so far behind your global upper back development that we need to isolate the rear delt? Like that's your weak point?
Yeah,
it's like,
probably not.
No.
That's also probably why I think, this is EMG, so it's only one thing, but the reverse pec deck, which I don't have here, was actually like the highest ranked exercise in a study on rear delts, which makes sense too, because if you pin yourself into the pad, you kind of roll forward and then you're stuck here. I can't go past this point unless I lean back. So if you keep your chest contact with the pad on a reverse pec deck, you're forced into this position and you can't do anything else. So it kind of like, you're choosing an exercise that positions you well if you don't have the skill to do it without something there to position you, you know what I mean?
I think cables for rear delts are really good too, because that's gonna help that oblique arm path. Rear delt doesn't sit straight at 90, so like that's why you need to internally rotate to get it in that position versus like if you were like cable, pull down, you can get it there easier.
Yeah, and that's where like, I think the anatomy is important. It's so hard, like I'm so like 50-50 on it. I think in some muscle groups and for some exercises, it matters more than in others, because some exercises you have to position yourself very specifically. The back entirely, I think it's pretty important because I can row 20 different ways and target different muscles. But with a squat, it's like, if you're built to be a quad dominant squatter, you're gonna hit your quads. If you're not, then you need to choose a different exercise. It's not like a crazy thing. And then I think there's people that take it too far and they don't push themselves in the gym because they're so worried about aligning the resistance curve and the line of force and everything so perfectly that they just train like a wimp.
I do think that a lot of the guys from Prescript and N1 you see doing both.
I see it more in Prescript personally.
Yeah. You're looking at the instructors right, versus their children.
Yeah.
And like, if somebody says they know the tailored coaching method and maybe went through it a little bit, do they really, really, really understand?
Right.
Versus like, it's like indoctrinated
Yeah.
into them. They can recite it versus like somebody who's like, I took PSL1.
Yeah.
And then, or I took N1.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
different. It's like the difference between truly understanding something, like just because you took it out of the book, and like experiencing it and like that wisdom. I think those are two different things.
100%.
And it takes that experience like with the subject matter to like actually know like, oh.
And to know when to apply it and when it doesn't matter.
Yep. Have you done like any cross body lat pull down? You might notice like you're like, oh, I get a real strong squeeze there, and that doesn't necessarily make sense because it's in a more stretched position. But like a lot of people are hugging closer to their body than they ever do in a row, and it's like, oh, it's actually the one thing we did to position you to get your lat. Whereas like when they were rowing here, they're like, and it's like, oh, well, that hit your rear delt and the upper back a bit more than.
Well, and that's where some of that stuff's important too, because a lot of people don't know that the lats also laterally flex your torso and your trunk. So if you do keep it close, or you just stop doing two, and you do a single arm, and you really kind of like bring it in, like you're doing a side crunch too, but you will crush your lat if you drag your elbow low and you actually like side bend, because you know the function of the lat is also to laterally flex your torso. I have definitely noticed majority of it for my lats. I've actually loved a lot of it because that's helped a lot for me. Chest too is another one I feel like is helpful, especially because like just doing straight bar bench just hurts my shoulders after a while. So being able to like play with the cables and like pressing with the cables and stuff. There's some people that are in the space, I think, pushing methods and theoretical ideas, but don't have.
They weren't in the trenches with it.
No.
Yeah. Not enough to actually start getting results from it, but they've tried it, they tasted it, and they're like, oh, like I feel things more.
Yeah.
And so that feeling is now associated with fact. Their facts are feelings instead of like the facts are facts.
Whew.
I think on the execution stuff too, like when you're getting to that short and end range stuff, so like that's when you're gonna see more compensation because the joint is less stable, right? The closer this gets to this, it's a weaker position for my rear delt. So it doesn't really wanna get here. So it might get to here and then pull mid trap, and it's like, you really want that extra little ounce out of your rear delt. Learn to isolate it.
Yeah. And then you also know when, like I noticed on my last set, like I got to failure, and then I noticed like the last few reps I started shrugging. I'm like, okay, I already took the rear delt to failure.
Yeah.
Let's just stop. Because I'm not here to train my traps.
Right.
Like I think with the rear delts and the traps, there's such a close-knit muscle group that it's like, you're probably gonna get a little bit of both. But that's where it's like, if I'm doing bicep curls and like I get all my reps in, I'm trying to go to failure, and now my traps are starting to burn, I go, okay, I'm shrugging, or my low back, my spinal erector shrugs, I'm swinging, like you're done, you know? So if you know when that compensation happens, you can actually like stop at appropriate failure.
That'll probably save you a little bit of like from going too far.
Yeah.
And taking the appropriate things to fatigue.
Injuring yourself. Yeah.
Dude, this was fun.
Dude, this was dope.
I appreciate you having me out.
Absolutely, man. Come out again, we'll get you on the podcast. That's a wrap. Shoulders, Stephen Davis. Hope you guys took something away. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below if you need any help with anything or I can help you in any way. Make sure you're here next time we drop a video. Catch you next time.